So I'm here to talk a little less about how we each work as individuals and a little more about what it means for the cities and the places that we work in. I've worked both as an urban designer and in designing workplaces for small local companies and national companies, from urban offices to suburban campuses. So let's see how this does. We get next slide? Great, thanks. So first, just to think about how all of these things have evolved, how we work in itself has evolved. So if we think traditionally, I'm not sure if this was ever really true, but this is the traditional conception of how we worked on the left, which is we had our focused individual work time, and then maybe we had some meetings, maybe there was some socializing, huddles, just kind of informal meetings, but essentially that there was a priority on the private office and there was a priority on the individual work. And then today, I don't know how you feel about how you work, but this is kind of how my life feels, which is that there's a lot of switching that goes on. So you're switching between trying to focus and you're having meetings, having just kind of interruptions that you're talking with people. And the thing is that all of this is work. I think we have an idea that just when you're sitting down at your desk, that's work, but actually more and more, we're productive through all of these connections that we're making. So with the rise of knowledge work and the rise of technology, we get to this place of a lot more switching and also a different kind of thinking around where we work. So I think there's a realization that that focus aspect maybe could happen anywhere. You could be working remotely, but then the rest of it is where you have to find ways to connect with people, and some of that connection is happening either in place, face-to-face, or is happening more and more with different tools online. So in terms of where our workplaces have been located over time, historically, or post-industrial revolution, more and more we saw offices located in the downtown. That was the kind of city center, and it was more of a financial district center, or a central business district is what people have called it. But over time, in particular in the 1950s, the rise of car culture, and led by a lot of R&D companies locating more where they wanted the whole kind of like all of their people together in their own campus, more and more companies moved out of the city. And that also goes with the kind of suburbanization that happens around the country. So this is just snapshots of San Francisco and South Bay, and you can see that distribution. So blue just means that it's past a half mile from transit. So how walkable is it? How accessible is it by public transit? But just the fact of that intense spread that happens is no longer concentrated in cities, and we all know that. And the offices more and more get to a point of providing everything that the worker needs in-house. So this is another way of looking at that in the past, we had this kind of central business district. This is San Francisco, and this is where the focus of business was historically, along Market Street, anchored by the ferry station, the ferry building, and by the trolley cars on Market Street. But more and more, the evolution we're seeing is that there's an interest, not just in working, but in lifestyle. So this is just a kind of extrapolation of the uses. So if we think of blue as more of the business district, then we start to get residential, culture, arts, retail, public institutions, and office all mixed together. So south of Market, that's where we see more and more companies have located within San Francisco, and they've been moving back in. And a couple of different things have driven that. In part, it's an interest in being in a more creative environment and a more mix of uses. So it's not just that you funnel into your office building and you funnel out and then the place is dead at night. It's actually more of a 24/7 cycle and an interest in the culture of a place. And more often than not, a company's location is driven by where the founder lives. However many of you are founders, how many of your companies, that's how you decided where they're located. And more people started moving back into the city for an interest in that culture. And so with that, you see businesses, and speaking with people where they're founded their businesses and located in the Mission. It's also an interest in where the artists live, where the rents are cheaper. That's where the culture is, and that's where a lot of companies started, but now the kind of the pricing of that is changing. At the same time as that interest in culture that's brought people back into the city, we've seen a couple of trends in workplace and in company workplace design. There's the big headquarters trend, right? So this is Facebook. This is their new-ish campus in Menlo Park. They took over Sun Microsystems campus and redid it, whereas it was a series of buildings with just a kind of generic park-like space in the center. They turned that center space where you see Hack into a main street of sorts. So essentially, Facebook created their own mini city. They have their own cafeteria, but they also created the hot dog stand and the barbecue joint and the bike kitchen, and so that it felt like a main street and it felt like a city all unto itself. And so that's that interest in culture, but created all in-house. And this is an example. This is one of those buildings at Facebook. This on the left is what it was when it was Sun Microsystems, where the priority was all on offices and ownership and status through having your office. And on the right is the redesign for Facebook, where the enclosed spaces none of them were owned by an individual. They're all shared spaces, and then the teams are in groups out in the open. So that's where there's this shift to collaboration and knowledge transfer, even if it's going to undermine some level of efficiency, is still of higher value. And so that's going towards experience and diversity and community in the workplace. So the two major trends we've seen happen is this, or three really: reurbanization, the community in the the suburban campus, and then the third is the mobility mandate. So while some companies have drawn their people all together to help collaborate and generate ideas together, other companies, and in this case the federal government, have mandated that we go more towards remote work. And this version of mobility really is driven less by culture and more by real estate savings. And so if you can have people only come in 3 days a week, as it says on the left, you'll actually have a space savings, because you can then share that desk across however many people. So you're leveraging a lot less real estate to serve the same population. And that's something the federal government has mandated across many of its offices to save on real estate. But unfortunately, in a lot of those cases, we haven't paired that with the same attention to culture. Similarly, we saw that at HP. So before, it takes the same trend as Yahoo a little bit, but HP went through an incredible initiative, multi-year initiative, to go towards open workplace and remote work and release a lot of their real estate. More recently, in a kind of refreshing of the company, I guess, they've now brought everyone back. And I think there's a kind of interest in innovation, seeing innovation as needing face-to-face, which may or may not be true. But I think that what we see in the terms of these differences, in some ways, sustaining companies are going for cost-cutting, where let's call it innovative companies are going for culture and collaboration. But at the same time, what all of them are doing is valuing, in certain ways, experience over space, choice of location or of the way that you spend your day, and variety. So what I think is interesting from this conference and what we're seeing now is a third way, which is that remote work and mobility is actually coming out of an interest in both culture and collaboration, and finding new tools to do that and to find the right talent to make the team. But at the same time, a lot of people still feel that working alone sucks. That's from a co-work space. And so I wanted to give one example, or two examples, which one is WeWork, which is actually one of the sponsors, coincidentally. And I don't work for them, but my office is in one of their buildings. They've been opening buildings around the country. And what they do in their buildings is let's see if we can go to the next slide. They rent offices. So it's co-work. It's a month-to-month lease. It's 1 to 15 person sizes. But what's interesting is they're creating opportunities to connect across organizations, particularly freelance to a larger organization. They're designing spaces that feel more domestic. They feel more like home. They have more of that like lifestyle and culture quality. Large kitchens are true in a lot of their spaces. And it's leveraging space in a different way. And so this is another example, which is Liquid Space. It's a mobile booking app, essentially like Open Space, but for office. And the idea is that actually office space isn't utilized very well. And if we if we have extra space, we can rent it out to other people. Or if you just need an office for an hour, you can look on there and maybe it's a co-working space, maybe it's a hotel lobby, maybe it's someone else's office that has an extra conference room. So suddenly we get into a little bit of the sharing economy and an idea that we can utilize space differently and connect across that. Well, when we think about the city, I'll just leave you with two thoughts about it. One is that we plan our transportation, we plan our land use, we plan all of these things for hubs of people. And if we distribute in this way, that changes this quite a bit. And so that's one thing to start thinking about is what does that mean? And there are debates around whether we're cutting carbon by not traveling to work or we're actually increasing carbon because we're doing a lot of small trips. But either way, we're changing our traffic patterns and we're changing what we actually are going to demand from our transit system. Another thing that's happening is we're realizing that our buildings aren't necessarily built for what we want. So this is an example on Van Ness of an AAA office building that's being renovated to become housing. And this is something I think we're going to see more of in the downtown, where office buildings are going to be adapted back into other uses, into housing or other uses, because we don't necessarily need as much space, and we don't really like it to be concentrated and separated nearly as much. So I will leave you with that as just some food for thought, that you are, you may be working individually, but you're part of not only your work community, but also the community of our cities, and to be thinking about what that means and what you want that to look like. Thank you.